Lot of loving, a lot of squeezing. Wait, who sang that song? Journey, right? Loving, touching, squeezing. A lot of touching, little squeezing, some loving. I know it's hard to compete with the ice cream bars, so grab an ice cream bar and your best friend and come on in. We've got a treat.
I know it.
Well, ice cream bars are a treat too, but I think you guys are sharing this one. Let's get this out of the way so there's no fighting. Two people who have...
Hey, Doug, you know you're going to have to fight with Mark for the microphone, right?
I can't wait to see these guys decide who gets most microphone time. Everybody has met Doug right here. Everybody's met Tom, Mr. Love, and we met John earlier, Mr. Relationship. Who you have not met is Mark Musselman. If you like the music that Todd, his little brother, played, and I won't say the reason he's a good guitar player, but part of the reason Todd's the man he is because you probably took good care of him when he was little, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It just so happens he's about 7 years older than me, but that's okay.
But
And he is littler, though.
he is littler.
He is littler.
You're always the big brother in
That's
my
right.
eyes. I don't know why.
Thank
So speaking of panels, here we are. On your program, we try to articulate the best we can the takeaways. And really how to create trusting relationships through language and behavior, create conscious habits, and provide greater results. Understand the role of being a leader through your entire life. How love and leadership is changing the landscape in the workplace. And then create action around how to up-level your key relationships. Outside of that, really all we want to do is generate some good dialogue around love, leadership, consciousness, and relationship.
Adventure.
Come again?
Adventure.
Adventure.
Come on, man, get the title right. If you're going to facilitate, you got to get the title right.
Yeah, answer the call. There it is right there. Too many ice cream bars, I guess.
See, I told you.
All right, so are we ready? I'm
Are
going to
you
start.
ready down there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're ready.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know if this is going to be a panel or a comedy hour, but we will see
sarcasm
what
could
happens.
Take over.
Yeah, John, you heard John say earlier he's never shy to give feedback, right? I think you're seeing it right here.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Musselman,
Sir.
please define for us leadership. And asked another way, what makes a leader a leader?
It'd be presumptive of me to say that I have a definition. I think like everybody in the room, each person has their own interpretation. And we've heard many variations of what that would look like depending on, your background, your origin, your experiences through life. I've spent a lot of years, now around probably 20, looking for an effective answer to that question, just one that works for me. So what I say is just an offering to the room that reflects 20 years of being curious about that question. And I'd start with what it's not, right? It's leadership is not something that is abusive. It's not something that is entitled. It's not a title. So just because you have something that says president or CEO or whatever designation on your card does not entitle one to the role of leadership. So I think that's important to recognize. And rather than me going through the motions of trying to memorize, I actually have recently, in the past 6 months, come across a definition that I think is the most effective representation. Leadership is a process of social influence which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a greater good. So if you just think about that and break that down, leadership is a process of social influence. How I relate, who my way of being is, and how it impacts others, maximizes the efforts. It's all about moving forward and increasing through abundance and things like that, towards the achievement of something that goes beyond what I could do individually. So, and I think the other thing to consider is it's a mindset. It's nothing that's bestowed; it's something that's earned. So, like trust. You could bestow trust upon somebody, but I think the most effective version of that is when it's earned through consistent activity and choices. So that's my version of it, and there's at least been 10 others today. So thank you for asking.
No, thank you. And as we're discussing up here, if there's a question that comes to mind or heart, please let us know, and we'll get a mic out to you, and you can just holler them up. Okay? Tom, this one's no, Doug. I'm sorry. This one's to you. How do relationships reflect back what your strengths or grow opportunities are as a leader?
Well, I can think about one of my dearest relationships, and that's the one with my wife. So I recognize that how I'm relating to her is a result of who I'm being. So in other words, if and I'll expand it past Leslie, but in any relationship, if I find myself challenged with an individual, then I will always look inside of me to see what that is reflecting about me. So I know that there's always a reflection back from someone that I'm in relationship with to me, and for me to inquire internally about what that reflection is worthy, because it allows me to lead that relationship in another way.
Beautiful. A lot of what we heard today is leadership starts with inside of us. And what I think I love about what Mark said earlier is leadership is not always about us. It's who's following us and the people that are seeing us as an example as well. Mr. Tom, this one's to you. How does maintaining strong relationships within a leadership role serve the greater good?
Well, I think leadership starts with relationship. It is probably the most important thing that a leader has to nurture and pay attention to, and it starts. So I want to start with a relationship that is rarely talked about. It's the relationship with ourselves. And if we don't have a aligned relationship with ourselves, if we don't love ourselves, if we don't care for ourselves, if we don't respect ourselves versus abusing ourselves, then we will not be able to do those things for the ones that we are leading and influencing and having impact on. And so when you have a engaged workforce or family or classroom, whatever it is, it becomes a miracle of results. And so that's what I think the impact is on relationship.
A lot of us up here at the panel has focused a lot of time, most recently, and some of us more often than some of us, but on relationships. And I think there's one gentleman up here who spent a significant amount of his time on relationship, 30 years with the same woman, and a great relationship. And you heard him speak earlier, John Witry. John, referring back to your presentation, if you would, is it possible to disclose too much in a professional relationship?
Yeah. Is it possible to disclose too much in a professional relationship? Yes, of course. So the very short answer is yes, of course. It's very possible to disclose too much in a professional relationship. The thing, you see me kind of hesitating about answering that question because I don't want to give you any ammunition to not move the pendulum on how much you disclose in your professional world. So it is possible to disclose too much. And my experience in the corporate world, small business, it doesn't matter, is that people have a long way to go before they disclose too much. Like they have the pendulum tagged way over here around hiding. And so they're worried about disclosing too much, and if I answer yes, you can disclose too much, I'm afraid that you're going to leave the pendulum way over and not disclosing at all. What I would rather you do is push your boundary on disclosure and watch what it does to develop deep, meaningful relationships and your ability to expand trust and respect, which is a precursor to an engaged workforce. And play around, and you're going to find your middle ground. You're going to find your equilibrium. But I'd rather have you make a few mistakes in the area of disclosing too much, so you find this other side. So that it's not, if you're way over here, I'm not disclosing anything. I want you to push as far over here as you can, so that you get a sense of what middle is. So that's my take on that.
This is open to anyone on the panel, but I think sometimes I feel some people overshare. And then I
Yeah.
get into my head about, are they being in their ego? I think disclosure in the midst of a valuable, loving, trusting relationship, disclosure is unique from sharing. Does anyone want to comment on what they believe the distinction is? John?
Yeah, I thank you for that, and I think that's a really good point, is not collapsing those two, disclosure and oversharing. Disclosing is, Donna, my observation is that blank, 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 and the impact that it's having on me is this. And so in a way, I'm disclosing something that's happening in my heart or something that's occurring in my relationship with Donna, and that's that. Talking too much is talking too much. So oversharing is dominating a conversation. I'm just talking about taking those little squiggly lines that are in my heart or in my mind and putting them out here so that we can talk about them. I don't think that's oversharing.
Anybody else?
Yeah. Yeah, one of my all-time favorite quotes that I'm sure all of you are aware of is Jimi Hendrix, and, knowledge speaks while wisdom listens. So I don't think it's always, in terms of sharing, it's really what is the intention of the sharing matters. And I think when you have intention, it does something automatically. It automatically reduces the words that are necessary, but also what essence are you sharing from? So if you're coming from a place of caring and that, I think the vibration takes you directly into what are the right words to speak. So.
Yeah. Sharing just to share, hear yourself talk, certainly different than disclosing with someone you love and trust and you want to have a deeper relationship with. To me, it's that simple in terms of the distinction.
There's also, it's interesting because you can share yourself, which is not necessarily disclosing, it's just sharing your truth. So I think, terminology can be manipulated one way or another.
I'm going to break for a second, and a lady came up to me earlier and said, are we tweeting this conference? Is she in the room? Maybe she's... All right. Anyway, I think we set up a Twitter, #answer the call, ! 15. Would someone test that for me, please? Hashtag, does anyone tweet in the room? I don't know. All right, John's going to do it. Thank you.
What's a tweet?
Yeah. Next year, the panel will be a little younger, and this will would have already been done.
So I'm curious how Gray got there from sharing yourself.
Me too.
Right.
Well, no,
That's a big stretch.
sharing the conference.
Got it.
Right, tweeting. Tweety Bird is a sharer and a discloser. Come on, guys, catch up. Speaking of wholehearted leadership, Doug, might it be possible as an individual, on an individual level, might be possible, wholehearted leadership, but how can it be applied to business, in business?
That's the true leadership. I mean, it's the risk that you take in bringing your truth forward to connect in any environment, and being willing to risk that, despite getting a deal or not getting a deal, or getting a sale or not getting a sale. And relationships are what sales in my world are based on. So, like John said, we've got a long way to go from really sharing ourselves in any business environment from where we are. And I believe that, that the long-term relationships are based on people knowing who you are and me knowing who they are. So we got a long way to go. So figure out what the pendulum needs to go, and if you even go halfway there, you might be a quarter of the way there, in my opinion.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have this, and I've had this sort of notion, having had the opportunity to be a part of a family-owned business for about 20 years, and then having been a part of and served a number of other family-owned businesses, that this notion of wholehearted, I call it secular ministry, so it's just a different way of speaking towards the same aspect, that as human beings, the number one need that we all have, as some would posit, is to connect. And many people, an overwhelming majority of people, when you get into an intimate setting with them will, like Molly did so brilliantly in the room next door, share a life filled with all kinds of truths that even draw us closer to one another through the wounds and through the injuries and experiences. And I have this sense that in a business environment, that what really brings and holds people together and has people ultimately willing to sort of walk through a wall together is the ability for love to be the core value that emanates. And that's got to begin at the leadership level. There's many platitudes that are tossed around where people use that kind of a language. We love our people, we respect our people. But then you show up in the organization and there's people working 90 hours and they, you know, if you get into, they don't feel alive or thriving. So I think that sense of where it has the biggest opportunity is actually in the business world. How many waking hours do each of us spend in some form of vocation? The majority. If there's not love there, you know, I challenge anybody who's in a leadership role at any level to move towards that sense and that model.
We all work with organizations on some level, and I'm sure all of us do. What I look for is the true essence and desire for personal development within the organization, not to make the organization better, but the love and leadership and the caring for that individual on your team to see him or her grow. And that true love and caring and service to me has, again, like Mark said, nothing to do with the title of the person, but I have the ability to give you this time, put you into this program. I want to because it's important to you, I understand. You opened up a great opportunity for Tom here. How is love and leadership impacting the workplace? Or how might love and leadership impact the workplace?
Well, I talked about this in the presentation. I mean, if you look at the results we're achieving right now of disengagement, you know, 70% of the workforce is disengaged. I mean, we certainly can't do, if we keep doing what we're doing right now, I don't think it's going to get much better than that. And we've tried just about everything. So, you know, and there is evidence out there now, not as much as some people want to see, but there is evidence, and John Geese in his presentation showed some of that evidence of what happens when you create a workplace that really does stem from a more loving and heart-centered, compassionate place. The fact is, they are outperforming the market, not by a small amount, but by a significant amount, which is still a puzzle to me, is why is there still so much resistance out there? And I think it's fear. I think it's just there's so much pressure on a CEO to meet the bottom line in that the idea to be so bold as to have a chief love officer, to have a policy of what we call it, mutual respect, a low tolerance of some of the things that the abuse that goes in the workplace. So I guess the short answer to your question, Greg, is I think it would be a dramatic increase in not only performance, because leadership to me from a place of love, we think about the doing part of leadership, but there's a vibration that comes from leaderships. Even a bad leader, their vibration impacts everybody around them. It impacts the planet. And so the more we embrace that good feeling and that good intention, we shift the vibration. And sometimes a leader can lead without even saying a word.
I would say oftentimes great leaders lead without saying anything, just by example of who they're being. Does anybody resonate with that?
Yeah.
Any parents in the room? Raise your hands, please.
Lots of parents.
Anybody, parents of anyone less than 10 years old? Raise your hand. Can you imagine what we're demonstrating to them every time we're in their presence? With our eye contact, how we interrupt them or walk into a room. I'm talking about myself here for a second. Until I learn, it's all about being patient and present. And I think that same presence and patience in the workplace, not so much the boardroom, but in the workplace, is how you show up, and you're patient and you're present. Again, it's not about you. It's about them. And if they're not making a mess and burning down the house, let them play. And you use the title, Chief Love Officer. Do we need titles to be chief love officers?
No.
Do we need a title to be loving and serving? That's a rhetorical question, especially for this group.
Can I add one thing to that?
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, we talk about this whole notion of love, and, when Tom mentioned chief love officer, there is a undertow of laughter in the room because it's discomfort, right, that's showing up, or there's a perspective. I cannot think of any particular human aspect amongst all of the things that all of us spend every single day endeavoring to master that's more challenging and difficult than loving. It requires forgiveness, it requires reconciliation, letting go, moving on beyond the injury. It's so much easier to default into the wound or the upset or the, I'm now getting the story. There's so many ways, but the rigor, the real rigor for a leader is in the midst of all that, to return to the center and really look for the most effectively loving way to respond. And love as a language makes some people uncomfortable, and there's lots of reasons that it makes people uncomfortable. I worked in a business again, and I was in an experience when my family's business went through bankruptcy, and there was a circle of men as I was in an abject, horrible spot, and my brother Todd and 3 other men were surrounding me, and I was emotionally beyond distraught. And one man, his name is Mark, in that moment said, "I love you" to me, and we'd worked together for 11 years. It was the first time in his life he had ever uttered those words to another man in his life, not his father. His father never said it to him, and he had never said it to his sons, and he had 2 of them. And in that moment, through a work environment, through caring for a human being who was in absolute distress, he accessed something that the minute he went home that day, he went home to his boys and shared with them how much he loved them. He called his father and said the same thing because he realized in that moment how absurd it was for him to have denied himself an emotion that's universal. So I'd say, if you want a rigorous expedition, go on the expedition of loving and forgiving and reconciling and letting go of and moving into. That's powerful. That's really effective.
And Greg, I do want to add, the business partnership. It's a high accountability environment. And yet, it's not the kind of accountability that comes from a place of judgment. I mean, I know for myself, there's some things I've dropped the ball on. And when we're called out, there's always a feeling of love. There is not a single person on this partnership that I feel judges me or loves me. But at the same time, they're not hesitant to call us out. And I think that is really powerful. I think that's what makes all the difference.
Well, I think what's interesting about your statement in that, Tom, is we're actually calling each other out from a place of love.
Yep.
I love you so much that I don't want to leave you in this place that you are. It's not serving you. I can be nice to you, not interested to care enough, or I can serve you from a place of love, hold you accountable to what you said you wanted. What's interesting is how tied together the word love and accountability actually are.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that strikes me as I'm listening to you guys, I think our context for the word love is a little bit messed up. And I think maybe there's some redefinition of it that we could stand, or the broadening of that definition, because we have a tendency to see it as this very highly emotional, intimate, soft type of love. I've never felt more love from people outside of my direct family than I do from the partnership. And these are a group of women and men that will get in my face at the drop of a hat purely from love, purely from loving and caring about who I am.
We gave Stephen a much-deserved award today around a simple topic of distinctions. And Stephen put together 12, as Doug alluded to earlier. We've lived all of last year, not this year so much. But another distinction on the table right now is the difference between pleasing and serving. We don't have the time right now, but if I were to separate the wall where the air wall is and ask those that by majority of the time and how they spend their effort during a week, if you're a pleaser, you'd be on this half of the room. If you're a server, you'd be on that half of the room. So just by show of hands, just out of curiosity, and this is a real time to have a gut check. Do you honestly believe you spend the majority of your time pleasing people? Let's go. Get them up there. Or how many spend most of their time serving people? Do we see and understand the vast difference? So what I'm going to do is ask any of the panelists who feels like speaking to this. Steve Chandler just put out, he's a coach, he's written tons of books. He tweets out and emails out almost every day. He's a brilliant man, very simple, straightforward. But he put out an audio the other day around this, pleasing and serving. So who wants to dive into expanding on that distinction, please?
I'll start. And by the way, this is Steve Chandler's birthday today, and he was going to be here, but we gave him a pass because of its birthday. So happy birthday, Steve.
Happy birthday, Steve.
You know, pleasing, and I spent a lot of my life pleasing and wanting to please, and I alluded in my talk about wanting to be validated and acknowledged, and that's all about pleasing me.
Yeah.
So at some point in my life, it's exhausting. It's exhaustive of me and my community. And when I awoke to the fact that that doesn't serve anyone, I began to really recognize my self-interest in wanting to please people. And in serving, it is not about pleasing. It's about, you know, opening my desire to support someone in a way that no one else typically would support that person. And sometimes it creates some fierce conversations. Sometimes it's not buying into their story.
Right.
And so serving is the deepest resource of supporting, or the deepest way of supporting someone else from my point of view. And I have my partnership. I have my family. I have my sister, my wife, my brothers, who I consider destiny partners in my life. I ask them to help me be who I say I want to be. And I'm not asking them to please me. I'm asking them to be honest and to serve me in a way that I can be a better man for my community, for the people I work with, for my clients who I'm coaching, and to make an impact in a way that no one else, or not very many people, are willing to do. And sometimes those conversations do upset me. But that's when I'm getting served. So that's my point of view.
Yeah, before I turn it over to Mark, I want to reiterate what I heard Doug said, make a point about this. In the partnership and in most key relationships, the person is asking you for insight. They're asking you for feedback. In the partnership, we have put out our Aconcagwas at the very beginning of the year. So to a man or to a woman, we have said, these are my asks. This is what I want from you. So when we serve that person or support them, we're giving them exactly what they asked for. It's hard to serve someone when you don't really know what they want because you haven't asked. And I think great leaders ask, how may I serve? I think Chris Nansky had that on his very last slide. Not how can I help you, but how may I serve you? And if they don't want it, then you don't have to give it to them. Anybody else?
Yeah, good. And try to keep this as simple, as concise as possible. I don't know this to be a truth. It's not the truth. Pleasing is about you under the guise of it being about them.
Right.
Yes. Serving is about them. Pleasing is about you under the guise of being about them, and serving is just about them.
I like that.
Beautiful.
And so John, I believe it is them and yourself. Because again, I don't think that if we just focus always on them and we're not taking care of ourselves, I think we deplete ourselves. So I don't know how that would fit into the equation. So I don't.
It just makes it really long and not clean as concise. That's the only.
Hey, I was going to say, somebody asked this question of me. I was using that distinction in a bit of work I was doing a few weeks ago, and somebody asked me, well, you know, you use this pleasing versus serving. What does that mean? And it was interesting because I hadn't really thought of it beyond the two words. I knew it intuitively. And they wanted a kind of a definition, so I slowed down and I said, well, great question. The way I would describe pleasing is I'm unwilling to have a conversation that might lend itself to the loss of a relationship because of what's said or what occurs inside that conversation. Serving is I'm fully willing to step into the conversation and completely willing to not have the relationship as a result of what occurs inside the conversation. And I'm okay with that. And that's what felt true to me and made sense, I think, in the moment. So,
And just, it takes practice. It really does. I mean, I know that there's an intention to do it, and then there's the first time, and then there's the second, and then there's the 30th, and then there's the 300th, and it takes practice.
And what do you get more of if you focus on that? So if your intention is to serve and love and care for another human being, practice it. Hopefully we've given you some tools today. Speaking of practice, John mentioned in his presentation, he cheats. He has questions and he writes down. He thinks of something, how he can have a better relationship with his spouse. So John, how can I give my spouse, not in my case perhaps, but proverbial speaking, I guess, how can I give my spouse feedback? I give someone else's spouse feedback, I guess.
Yeah, fear and trepidation.
There you go. How can I give my spouse feedback without it turning into an all-out battle?
Yeah, I wrote down some hard questions.
Yeah, these are not surprises.
You know, it's a skill. It's graceful. It's practice. I think I will speak to Donna and I's relationship. The thing that I've had to really work on is, look, I'm a coach, and so the risk is coaching my wife when I give her feedback. I work on never making my wife wrong. I always invite her into a conversation about something I'm observing, something that I'm experiencing. And it's in that conversation that I can give my perspective of how something's transpiring. And so I'm doing everything that I can for feedback to be a conversation. The only way I know how to maintain a conversation is to stay highly accountable to my experience, not make her wrong, and keep inviting her back into the conversation every time I see her pull away. And it doesn't always go well. And I'd be lying to you to tell you that we've worked that out. I am 100% truthful when I say we are persistently practicing being able to give each other feedback in conversation so that we have a loving, affinity-filled relationship till the day we leave this earth. And then sometimes it goes really, really bad, and we have a really tough time cleaning up the messes that we created, and we create messes, and then the other commitment or agreement that we have with one another is we're going to clean up our messes. We're going to clean up our messes with each other. So again, this is risk-taking. Giving feedback to someone like your wife, that's a risk. Let's just be straight.
And there's one thing.
I would call
We've
that...
both been married 24 years.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Well, we're not married.
No.
That would be awkward.
Thanks for clearing that up.
In my relationship, there has to be an agreement or an understanding for me to give her feedback.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So if I'm giving feedback to my wife without her permission, guess what what happens with that? It doesn't go very well. But in the same respect, we have that relationship, and I do ask for permission sometimes, because sometimes the feedback I know is going to be a little more poignant than others, and it goes both ways.
Yeah, and I'd say, having not been married to Doug, but also been married for 24 years, that if I'm going to revert to being an infant and all the places that I'm my least best, it's likely when I'm in conflict with my wife, right? That's just it. I don't have that relationship with many other people, but somehow, some way, I revert to a place of, so we set up a daily invite. So we get up and we have coffee every morning from 6:15 to 7 o'clock. And that's been something we've established now for years. My brother does that as well. And I can't remember if he influenced us or we influenced him. I think it was him influencing us. And it's been the place where we work on those things. So we try not to engage in that kind of process in the middle of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's when we found it goes the least well. And, then we're actually slowed down from 6:15 to 7, and we've created time to move through the length of a conversation where things could be unraveled and worked through, as opposed to the heat of the moment. We've got 4 kids, and that adds its own level of dynamism. And so I just say that if I get to my worst place ever, it's usually in the middle of the day when we're trying to solve something, and I'm giving her feedback, like dishes or like ridiculous stuff, right? Who hasn't been there? And that's when it's like, listen, but I know how to load a dishwasher, okay, buddy? Back off. I was doing this a long time. So that's the kind of stuff I've found. So we just stay away from that and talk about stuff in the morning.
Dynamism?
Dynamism.
Dynamism. That's nice.
So
Like that-
Greg,
Intense fellowship. Thank you, Lisa.
Speaking of intense fellowship, who wants to talk about the
well,
distinction?
can I
Yes,
add one more thing,
please.
Greg, before we move on? Because this will apply to you and me, since we don't have partners to get that feedback from. There's another type of feedback in the world that I think is unerring, and that is the world. I think, the world will always reflect back to us what's going on inside of us. And so I have conditioned and trained myself to really pay attention to what's happening around me. And it's never, because I don't believe we're ever a victim in that sense. And so if there's chaos going on around me, that is feedback to me to start looking inside and where am I in chaos. And so that's how I've learned. Actually, I trust that tremendously. So.
Speaking of trust, it is off the subject, but on the subject, when John mentioned to us not making them wrong, I don't know about anyone else in the room, but it immediately shot in my heart, then I do that at times. I have feedback and input and sharing, then it ends up trying to make someone wrong. And Tom, you've held me accountable several times on that. And I've even shared emails and I'm about ready to send someone, and Tom's kind enough to say, basically, I love you, brother, but what are you really trying to say here? So if you have someone like that in your life where you can get all fired up and put a document together, but before you hit send, do you have an accountability partner or anyone in your life that can say, what are you really trying to tell Lisa? Because if it is loving, caring, and sharing, or input, this is not the right message to send. So if you don't have a partner to do that, then great. The next distinction we were going to get into was hearing versus listening. Hearing versus listening. Any relationship coaches in the audience, by the way? Feel free to. Oh, good. So this will be new for everyone. Now, hearing versus listening. Anybody? Chime in on that one.
Well, I will, because I heard this in a yoga class.
It must be true.
It really resonated with me. I mean, hearing, the difference, the distinction between hearing and listening is being willing to be transformed by what you hear. Listening is being willing to be transformed by what you hear. So it's having the presence to be engaged with that phone call or that one-on-one, and hanging on the edge of every word that comes out of that person's mouth and willing to be transformed by that.
So I heard this on a fortune cookie.
That must be true.
Fortune cookies.
And you paid good
Sooner or
money to
later,
be
we'll
here.
have an expert
Remember
up
that. Does anyone
But no,
have a cookie?
this just came to me that hearing is fake presence, listening is true presence. That when I'm listening, it is everything that Doug said. It's the place of I'm so open that I'm not going to engage the ego at all to combat this, to challenge this. I'm going to take it in. So.
You know, it's funny. We heard Stephen talk about truth a lot during his presentation. I mean, I think he used the word true or truth maybe 100 times, perhaps. Yes? So if we were to draw a big box in front of us now, this is an exercise, just an idea, and write the word truth in it, what attributes or qualities as a leader would you put inside that box? And then when you look at those, are they really deserving to be in your truth box? or are those ones you really need to work on? So just food for thought. Mr. Wittry, how do you ask questions and stimulate conversation? Too often I get a yes or no answer, and I feel like pulling teeth to get information.
Yeah, it's funny. I would love to tell you that I'm an expert at asking questions, but I gave you my background around that earlier, and so I'm in practicing. And what I do notice, though, is without practice, we have a tendency to formulate questions that can be answered in a yes or no. And so I think, this is where slowing down to speed up is really important, and thinking about how do I elicit the heart of this person with my wife. How was your day, dear? Fine. And as opposed to, I'd love to hear about one of your experiences with one of your clients today. Like, what was the most moving experience that you had with your client? She does elder care. And that's a really different answer. And requires her to slow down. And, quite frankly, sometimes her comment is, can we have that conversation some other time? And so I'm okay. But really learning to ask questions that require someone to drop down in their heart to give an answer, as opposed to being able to answer from your head. Answering from your head is kind of a yes-no scenario. But if you can formulate a question that has them explore, I don't know, what was my most powerful experience with my client today? Well, I had this situation, and then she's off to the races. And then my other favorite question is, what else? Tell me more. And believe me, that is practice, because this is really gender biased probably, but I'm fine with fine. I was fine with fine. But what I realized is being fine with fine did not allow us to have more affinity for one another. It didn't allow me to know my wife. It didn't create an actual conversation. It created an opportunity for us to pass in the hall and say, okay, we saw each other today, fantastic. And so I purposefully slowed down, and somebody asked me for my 500 questions, and I'm going to send them, but no, yeah, a couple of people now raising their hand. No joke. I've been collecting questions because I wasn't smart enough to think of them myself. And so all I do is look at really cool questions, and I'm going, man, I'm going to try that one on Donna tonight when she comes home. Or my kids, look, how many of you have ever had a teenager? Or even run into a teenager? Getting them to give more than a one-word answer is not easy. And you can learn questions to ask them that'll get them to open up. And I only say that because I did it with a boy and a girl. But it takes practice. Sorry, that was a really long answer. I hope it got to where you wanted.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and while John's busy trying on questions with his wife,
Yeah.
if you want to go into wholehearted love, I wouldn't suggest questions to try on. I'd suggest something else.
Okay.
Lingerie.
Lingerie.
Yeah, lingerie.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Well, I don't want to.
Thanks, Mark.
This is going to be real
Really takes
easy.
the conversation to a higher level.
Wholehearted love.
It's speaking of underwear. Yeah, I don't know where we went with that one. But,
Just dropped our consciousness by
Yeah, right, substantially.
how many times have you asked somebody a question knowing they're not in a place to receive it? So I think knowing the person, knowing the environment is also, like as John alluded to earlier.
It's huge.
It's huge.
Can you ask that question again?
When
You just asked.
the timing and the environment of the question can also have a lot to do whether he or she's willing to even engage. Again, if you're asking because you're curious versus you really care about their day, it might be well served to wait.
Can I say something on that? Interesting. I had a client.
Sure.
All the relationship work we do. So there was one little disagreement about, well, he always asks me questions right when I'm getting ready to fall asleep.
This is
And
one of your clients?
One of my clients.
In a session?
I had a husband and a wife in a session. And so my normal response is, hey, why can't you have that conversation earlier in the day? And without even being conscious and without slowing down, out of my mouth came, is sleep so important that you can't answer the question? What would it be like? Not every night, but what would it be like just to answer the question? Are you so intent in having your own way and having to have the environment perfect and the right timing and the right question that you have to have your way, and now you're fighting about when you ask a question? What if you just answered the question? Would you be willing to lose an hour of sleep to have a really deep, meaningful, heartfelt conversation? And then I went, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. But it's actually a really good point. Like, we get really stuck on, I have to be in bed by 9. And look, I know you need to take care of yourself, so don't get me wrong. But sometimes I think we use those things to block, quite frankly. So maybe we just give in. Maybe we just serve the other person and just say, not the best time to ask that question, but let's explore it.
And I have to clarify myself. I thought you said they asked you a question when you were getting ready to fall asleep.
No, actually,
Yeah, no, that would be weird.
I thought John was asking his client's question when they were falling asleep.
Yeah. No, I like that.
They can answer any way they want. Tom, I don't know if you knew this one was coming, but I think you're the best person to answer it, because I want to expand on a couple of this area. Can you give us an example of a company or an organization that you've worked with that has operationalized leading with love in the workplace?
Well, I can't, because I don't necessarily work directly with organizations in that sense, but I believe I met a company today at this conference that I suspect does it. And it's a company called Stellar Care. Robert and Paul sitting right over here. In 15 minutes, what I heard and what I felt vibrationally, I have a feeling they are as close as I have ever experienced or heard about. So I do want to follow through and go down and visit with them. I do think there are some corporations in the world who are, I don't think there's anybody out there, I have not read or heard of anybody out there who would match sort of the vision that I have. But there are companies who definitely have momentum going. And one that I have indirect experience with has already been mentioned again. I think it came up in John's presentation, is Southwest Airlines. Mm-hmm. And I know a couple of employees that work for them, and I have never seen such excitement about their job. And that, to me, is evidence that Southwest Airlines is doing something right. And I think even as passengers, people are feeling it. So that's my answer.
I think part of why Southwest Airlines, to my knowledge, is one of the only airlines that is making money. Part of it is their employees, and they get a chance to own some of the airlines. But I also believe it's the way they're recruited, the way they're trained, and they have fun on the job. So let's talk about having fun on the job. And yes,
I would like to hear from you.
you want to.
Would you mind sharing it just?
So we serve individuals with developmental disabilities up and down the front range, in Colorado Springs, Denver, and Fort Collins. And
Thank you, Joe.
I had a vision to put together a business plan about 5 years ago to serve individuals in our community. And in doing so, we had a vision of caring for our staff, which was our first and foremost idea. It really started with me, and we've evolved into 95 employees, 40 independent contractors, and we've really instilled some values that we feel strongly about that have been imposed onto them. We do it both socially, economically, financially, just having a shoulder to cry on. And by doing that, we've been able to impose not only our values, but to our staff, but then the staff themselves are able to transcend that to individuals that are challenged every single day of their life. And so by doing that, we have instilled the social norms of what's going on in our communities. Many of you may be familiar with what we do, but it's challenging to care for somebody day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And by doing that, we really, to build that trust, we want our staff to be a lifetime staff. We want them to be with us for life. So by doing that, we want the social norms of our individuals to be felt like they've been cared for. And so by having that, we can build a long-term company that will never go away. I'm writing my retirement check every time a person joins our company, whether it's a client, a staff. And so by doing that, I can sleep good at night by what we're doing. And so we've put together a lot of different models within what we're doing to be successful. For example, our direct care staff, who are our lowest monetarily staff, we've imposed a model that's much different than our competitors and how we pay, how they actually conduct their own job. We have a pay scale that starts them out. For example, if we have 1-to-1, we have them paid at $10 an hour. If they're with 2 individuals, they get paid at $11 an hour, 12.25 for 3, and 14 for 4. So we've imposed a pay scale that allows them to be successful monetarily. We've also imposed, in times of goodwill, when they've had things, for example, they take individuals out and recreate, have fun. You talked about having fun. That's what they do. We build skills like, for example, money management, social skills, boundary issues while they're out. But one of the things that we've done is we've developed a hardship fund. And if anyone was, for example, their car was to break down, we will help them get their brakes fixed or get new tires so they can have that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is at the very basis of understanding that they can go to work, they can have friends, they can have family. Those basic needs of food, shelter are met. And by us being able to do that, we then allow them to eventually go up the pendulum, which is self-actualization. And so by having that, they're able to do many more things for themselves. And so we've put lots of things in place. For example, in Colorado Springs and Denver, we have a Taurus, a Ford Taurus, that allows them to go out. If their car breaks down, that we just get them back on the road and they're able to do their job. So again, it builds that self-esteem, it builds that self-actualization. They're having fun on the job, they're going to work every day, enjoying what they're doing. So we've really instilled a lot of values, and we've exploded our market. We've doubled our gross sales every single year that we've done this, and it's amazing. I mean, I'm blessed every day going to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So.
Great to hear from you. Thank you.
You know, as we go through our work days and we walk through the halls of the large companies that some of us are still in, when's the last time a leader walked by you and asked what he or she can do for you, or how they may serve you? Was really present, was really patient, was really engaging, was really of service. So let's now ask yourself, when's the last time you were like that? For anybody in your life, when you slowed down to ask somebody what you can really do for them in a way that was meant to do nothing for yourself. I call it service without attachment. Your servant leader model is congratulated, and it sounds like you're doing well with it, and congratulations.
Can I say something? Greg?
Absolutely.
There's an evolution to that, I believe, and when you are engaged in relationship with someone, the evolution is not needing to ask, but knowing, and knowing intuitively what would serve them, and then just doing it. And I don't know how that looks in any of the relationships that you have, but if you are connected with someone and engaged, sometimes a question is appropriate, but most of the times it's just a knowing. It may be to put the dishes in the dishwasher, It's a simple thing.
Great point. Great point. 24 years, right?
Yeah.
But not to Mark.
Not to Mark. Well, he doesn't like Mark's underwear. Or was it your underwear Mark didn't like? I don't know. All right. Yes. Are there any questions in the audience? Anytime, yes. Who's got the mic? Could you bring it to Dinah, please? Thank you, Joe. Maybe Steve, Mr. Katz, are you in the audience still? He's got the wheels.
John's got it.
John's got the wheels.
too.
Ladies and gentlemen, John with the mic.
Oh, push the,
Push
John, will you help?
Here we go.
There you go.
Okay.
I'm really curious. You guys all have this focus on, really, it's love and authenticity and connection and people, humanity in leadership, executive level. Is that what opens the door to working with them, or is that what gets addressed once you're in the door? Do you know what I'm saying? Are you selling that, or are you selling something else?
Let me take the first stab. I think exactly what Doug said applies to my answer. You either are a servant leader or you're not. You either are this way or you're not. I don't think there's any selling. I just serve and serve and serve. Even though I had a very prolific sales career, I don't think I've sold a thing. I just asked somebody, I had them buy something they really wanted. So I think it's a way of being. And they feel comfortable around you. So that would be my quick response. John?
Yeah, I agree with that, and maybe I'm saying the same thing a different way, is I am who I am no matter where I go. And so there are certainly people that don't want to work with me because they want to just talk about the hard, cold facts. They're really more interested in the goal line, and I'll meet them there, but it's very quickly that I will also talk about bigger topics than that. And I move those conversations at the pace they can handle. So I will say that sometimes people come to me and say, help me make a bunch more money. And I'll say, okay, I'm happy to do that. And we'll start working on that. But I tell you, it's not more than 1 or 2 conversations in that we're talking at some level, at a heart level, too. It's pretty hard to be successful in what they're looking for without that. But I don't do any bait and switch. Not really trying to get in one way and then start having more meaningful conversations around love or affinity, that type of thing. I will say that this is my personal opinion, and there will be people in the partnership that would see it a different way, to be sure. I don't walk into the corporate world talking about love. It's a word that they don't have the same context for that I have. And so therefore it's almost like talking a little bit different language. But what I'm 100% sure is whenever they come in contact with me, they come in contact with love. And so I know that just by being me, we will get to that conversation. But it's a language, that particular language right now, the way our society is set up, is something a lot of them can't engage in right off the bat.
I would say, to answer your question very directly, that I tend to approach initial conversations more through a business-oriented discussion, and as the relationship evolves, it opens up and moves into, because it's a natural part of just discovering. It's no different than if I went on a first date with somebody. I might not just jump into a conversation about love. I might ask them about what they like to do, where they like to spend their time. As we get to know one another and that trust opens up and there's more context for a relationship, then I would open up and move more into a conversation that invites that in there.
Yeah, and I will add to that too, and I love what everybody is saying here, and what John just said is, obviously, no, I don't think you just go in and start spread it. You have to have some, if you don't have due diligence and you don't know what you're going into, I would say it's wisdom to not present love, but certainly be love. Certainly be love. And what not for me personally, but I have a lot of colleagues who are, including my colleague up in Fort Collins, who is actually now really putting himself out there with major corporations across the world. And he is telling me that there is such a desire to have this dialogue. And so we have to be brave enough, if this is something that we feel we really believe in, we have to have that courage to engage that. And there's an author, and I'm not familiar with this author, maybe some of you are, Peter Block, and I can't remember the last book. And John, do you know Peter Block? Okay, but anyhow, to summarize real quickly, is he said, we're looking around for examples of corporations that come from a place of love. And he says, that's like being a parent and looking around and watching for enough examples of loving parents, and then you decide to be a parent. Don't wait, be it.
We're hitting to the end of time. So are there a couple more questions that anyone wants to ask? Burning questions?
I'd like to follow on Donna's.
Okay.
Do we have the microphone for her?
I can speak well.
You can
No,
hear
we'll
it
get you the
comes.
microphone.
And then we're wrapping up.
Thank you. It sounds like you're saying
Bing, turn it on.
That's no. Try now.
it's not. Okay, now it's
It's green. Go.
Okay.
It sounds like what you gentlemen are saying is that you meet your clients where they are
Yeah.
to start the conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
And we're all the same. At our core, we're all the same.
right. So I'm interested, just as a point of reference and possible referral, where do you tend to, where they are that you tend to meet your clients? I hear words like engagement, I hear words like, I don't know, what, profitability increase, what is it that
Culturally.
culture change?
Culturally, if they're not interested in up-leveling servants or leadership, they don't have any interest in deepening the relationships of the people, to your point. To me, service leadership is not about customers, it's about serving the people within your organization. If the culture isn't open to expanding in that area, not interested.
Right, so that's you.
That's
and
me.
what about you, Doug, and Mark, and
Well,
Tom,
so
and
small
John?
business or corporations are always interested in efficiency and productivity.
Yep.
So return on investment with, a focus on efficiency and productivity.
And I call ROI return on intent. I want to know, what do you really want to do? Stephen has been saying this for years. What is it you want? And what are you willing to do to get there?
I'd say, as having been the CEO of two $25 million companies I look for people who are in that role primarily, who are struggling with the same kind of things that I struggled with. So, do I have the right people? Are we moving in the right direction? Can I afford that? Do I have the right people in the right roles? The structural team that's going to move the organization forward. So I look for those kind of conversations primarily at any level of business.
I think she's going down the
Yep.
line, Tom.
Okay, yes. So, yeah, I'm not actively engaging companies right now, but I'm pretty bold about it. And
Yeah.
when I do, and so I trust. I don't always know how to meet someone, so I listen to my inner voice, my higher self, and if I get the nudge to say something, I trust it. And then lastly, I will change the key words so that I'm saying the same thing, but the words are more aligned with what they are used to. Yeah.
I unravel challenges so that things work. So if it's a high-performing team or a team that wants to operate as a high-performing team, and that's a challenge they want to unravel, I love that arena. I love the challenge of a relationship that wants to go from good to great, or somebody that's contemplating divorce, or somebody that's being divorced and they want to do it well. I love unraveling those challenges so that those things work. I love fixing the siding on my house. That's a challenge to unravel so that it works. So if I can help unravel a challenge and have it work, I want to play.
Thank you all.
Great question.
We're going to thank you for your time and patience. Thank you, panelists, Doug, Mark, Tom.
Thank you, Greg.
John.